Hello, I'm putting my headphones in. It is good to be with you all this morning. Thanks for being here. It is not previously recorded. Let me get that off of there. Yes. Who am I here with and what is going on this fine Wednesday morning? What is going on? It is so good to be with you. Good morning, Bonnie. Good morning, Elisa. Good morning, Kathy. Good morning, Sally and others. I am so glad to be here. Let's get right into this, talking about what's happening. We are in some very difficult passages, especially for those of us who follow Jesus. This is Jesus at his most frustrated, at his most heartbroken, just before the cross, completely rejecting the temple as the temple is completely rejecting him, right? We believe is God in a bod. And yet his home, the place that was supposed to be his people and his home, have completely rejected him. And so we're in the middle of his judgment, his pronouncing of judgment over them. Hard for us. This chapter 23 and 24 are easily some of the hardest passages for Jesus' followers because Jesus seems so unlike the Jesus we have in our head, this kind, docile, loving person. But this is the Jesus we worship. So let us dig right in, right? Jesus is talking to the religious leaders and he says, "How terrible it will be for you legal experts and Pharisees, hypocrites. You are like whitewashed tombs. You look beautiful on the outside." So here's what would happen. Jews were not allowed to touch dead things or anything associated with dead things. It would make them unclean. So what would happen was they would whitewash these tombs to make them bright white or as white as they can, so that Jews wouldn't accidentally touch tombs. Because if you touched it, you were unclean for 7 days. You couldn't be a part of society for 7 whole days. And so whitewashed tombs were a part of these cultures, and they were often beautiful, Jesus says. Second line, halfway through, they look beautiful on the outside, but inside they are full of dead bones. This is an incredible attack on the religious authorities and leaders because he's accusing them of being unclean things. Like a dead human body was one of the most unclean things there was in society. And Jesus says, that's what you are. You're like a beautiful on the outside, but inside you're just a dead, unclean human bones and all kinds of filth. That's what he says you are. Not you, the religious leaders. 28, in the same way you look righteous to people, but inside you are full of pretense and rebellion. So he explains what he means by this. You look great on the outside, but inside there's nothing going on. There's no religious transformation. The Holy Spirit is not moving. On the outside, it looks like you're very religious. You're going to lead all these people closer to the Lord. But inside you got nothing. Nothing. 29. How terrible or woe it will be for you legal experts and Pharisees, hypocrites. You build tombs for the prophets and you decorate the graves of the righteous. Yeah, you build these tombs for the prophets and you decorate the graves of the righteous. But my slides are going to change right now. And you say, if we had lived in our ancestors' day, we wouldn't have joined them in killing the prophets. They're saying we're different than those ancestors who killed the prophets. We wouldn't have done that. And Jesus says, you testify against yourselves that you are children of those who murdered the prophets. He's saying by saying our ancestors' day, you are claiming to be part of a spiritual heritage that has killed every one of the prophets that have come. Killed, maimed, ostracized, whatever it is they did to him, you're claiming to be a part of that. And Jesus is saying that because of what they did to John the Baptist and what they're going to do to him. They are a part of this wicked generation, they said. 32. Go ahead and complete what your ancestors did. The Greek is fill up what your ancestors' days. It's about this idea of like you are going to complete the work that they did, and it's going to be in killing Jesus. 33. You snakes, you children of snakes, how will you be able to escape the judgment of Gehenna? Or the word we translate that as hell. 34. Therefore, look, I am sending you prophets. These are going to be Christians. Wise people, sages, and legal experts, these followers of Jesus, Christians, you and me. Some of them you will kill and crucify, like they do to Jesus, and some you will beat in your synagogues and chase from city to city. They did this to St. Paul, the Judaizers. They would follow Paul from city to city, harassing him, threatening him, trying to undo the work that he was doing for Jesus. 35. Therefore, upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been poured out on the earth. This is a difficult verse. Jesus is laying the blame or laying the punishment and judgment for all the innocent and righteous blood that has been spilled on this generation. Because they have filled up the days of their ancestors, right? They have completed what their ancestors have done. They're going to ultimately kill Jesus, and Jesus is going to lay the punishment on them. He says, from the blood of that righteous man Abel, Adam and Eve's son, Abel, Cain and Abel, he's a righteous man, he was killed, to the blood of Zechariah, the son of Berechiah. This is found in 2 Chronicles. He was whom you killed between the temple and the altar. Jesus is saying literally from A to Z, Abel to Zechariah, all the innocent blood that was spilt, the judgment of those folks is going to be on you. I assure you that all of these things will come upon this generation. And then within 40 years of Jesus saying this, the temple was completely destroyed. Gone. Wiped out, not one stone left on top of another. The Romans came and destroyed it. One more slide and we'll be done with our passage, and then we'll do our sword stuff. Jerusalem, Jerusalem. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is weeping here. You who kill the prophets and stone those who sent to you, how often I wanted to gather your people together, just as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings. Jesus is using some symbols and imagery from Old Testament, but ultimately he's casting himself as this female character who has longed to gather Jerusalem and the people of Israel together. But he says, you didn't want that. In Luke, it says, if only you had known the things that make for peace. The people have completely rejected God, the religious leaders here. And God is wailing about how much God had wished God could gather them like a mother hen gathers her chicks. It's a heartbreaking scene. 38, last verse, no, 39 is. Look, your house is left to you deserted. This idea comes from Ezekiel. And the temple will be destroyed a little bit in Jesus' time, and ultimately 40 years later, completely destroyed. 39, I tell you, you won't see me until you say, blessings on the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Let's do our sword stuff. Sword stuff helps us to ask 4 questions. What do we learn about God? What do we learn about humans? Any commands to obey and any examples to follow? And here's what I think we learn about God. God has been rejected by the religious authorities of this time. God will bring judgment on these religious leaders for the blood of all the holy from A to Z. That's what God tells us here. And God does not force God's love on us. This is something that I took away again as reading this, when he says, you did not want that. I long to gather you, but you did not want that. God does not force God's love on us. This is a two-way street. And because of our rejection, the human rejection, God has let us walk away. And it is heartbreaking for God. What do we learn about people? Jesus sees us as the chicks to his hen. Jesus wants to gather us, protect us, hold us close, keep us comfortable. Humans always ignore or destroy the holy. This is something we learn about people. Humans always destroy the holy things or ignore them or try to do away with them. It was in them, and we have to recognize that that's in us too. The holy things that come before us, there's something about it that we just don't want any part of. And humans will often rise up to destroy holy things. What we see Jesus, this is another thing we learn about people. We see Jesus when we see him as the blessed one he is, right? He says, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. There's a part of this faith thing that our eyes and ears are opened when we are able to rightly identify who Jesus is in our life and in the world. We will see Jesus most clearly when we understand who he is and are able to call him blessed, even though he dies on a cross. Even though he teaches us to do the things that are opposite of the world around us. When we can call him blessed, we will see him most clearly. That's the spiritual law. I tell you, you won't see me until you say blessings on the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Right? There's this affirmation that Jesus' way is God's way, and that what he has done is in the name of the Lord, that it is sanctioned by the Father. This is going to be most scandalous when it comes to the cross, because people who died on the cross, messiahs weren't supposed to die. They were rejected messiahs. Messiahs are supposed to live and beat up the bad guys. And yet our Messiah dies, and in dying is victorious, but it isn't until we are able to see Jesus and his cross as blessed and as coming in the name of the Lord. And that's when we will have our eyes and ears open to the spiritual realities of the kingdom and who Jesus is and what God is doing in the world and in our lives. Yeah? Any example to follow? Don't be like those whitewashed tombs who look beautiful on the outside, but inside just dead. Jesus has no place for that. He'd rather you look terrible on the outside and have a thriving inner life going on than having to present yourself, put yourself together, right? We do this. We come to church. We put ourselves together when we're really, really struggling. Sometimes we just say, grocery store, how's it going? Fine, right? Jesus doesn't want any part of that. That's not what Jesus is doing. Jesus wants to make sure you are thriving. He wants you to be alive, even if the outside doesn't look put together all the time. Yeah? I think we can all agree and affirm and respect Jesus for that. Any example to follow? Ultimately, Jesus, who rejects the religious systems that claim to have a claim on God, and yet they lead people astray. They lead people far away from God. Jesus is the one who shows us who God is. Jesus is the one who leads us to God, but it leads to a cross. It leads to rejection. It leads to laying our life down. It leads to rejecting worldly ways of gaining power, right? It leads to all that stuff. It leads to the hard stuff. Here's my paragraph from prayer. The religious leaders have implicated themselves as murderers and thieves in their treatment of Jesus and John the Baptist, just like their ancestors did to the prophets. This system and their religious leadership. Here's my prayer for today based on this passage. Help me to see you, right? Blessed, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. I'm saying, help me to see you. That's my prayer for this day. Would you be blessed and have a lovely day? Be at peace. Bye. See you soon tomorrow, 8:30 a.m.